First up is how to get infinite summons, no mods and no bugs required. To do this, you'll need to be a Circle of the Spore Druid and have the condition Rejuvenating Miasma. This condition allows you to cast Animating Dead without needing a corpse due to a lingering necrotic stench. However, it also allows Spore Druids to cast Fungal Infestation without using a corpse, which raises a mildewed, mold-encrusted zombie from a corpse. What's great about this class action is that it only costs a fungal infestation charge, and there are no maximum number of zombies you can have. If you then just position yourself next to the giant Nautiloid Conch of Restoration, you can summon 3 zombies, use Restoration, summon 3 more, and rinse and repeat to your heart's content for an infinite number of zombie summons. You do get to control these zombies, so I hope you like to micromanage a ton of summons if you do this. I personally sent my horde of zombies against Ketheric, and they actually managed to take him down. A very effective tactic is actually using the ladder to stack all your zombies on top of each other so they are all within melee range to attack. And although Ketheric wasn't too bad, the Apostle of Merkel had some wicked AoE and heals which made short work of my zombie army, cleaving tons of them down in a single swing. It was a lot of fun since these zombies deal bludgeoning damage and skeletons are vulnerable to bludgeoning, so if you ever thought Spore Druid was bad, give this a try. I think it would have been even stronger if I was more patient and summoned even more zombies. And next up is Wulbren's secret weapon. Within Moonrise Towers is a captive deep gnome named Wulbren. If you talk to him, he begs you like a coward for help, asking for a blunt weapon for him to use to break down the wall behind him. It's also hilarious watching him get frustrated if you give him weapons that aren't blunt, but you can actually give him any blunt damage dealing weapon and he'll be able to use it, even if it's a weapon that can't otherwise be used. For example, you can drop the massive ogre club called the Gnarled Tree Branch into his cell, which says cannot be used by humanoids, and miraculously Wulbren will pick it up and use it. This is actually very helpful to allow the escape to happen quicker, since this club deals much more damage than the alternatives, and it also looks hilarious. To get this massive ogre club, just use command drop on the ogre named Chalk in the Blighted Village, then in Act 2 step up to the bars in front of Wulbren's cell and then click drop on the item while facing Wulbren. If done right, he'll pick it up. And next up is a newly discovered undead minion that is easily the best in the entire game because of its total immunity to physical damage. This minion is the Justiciar Crusader. This massive level 7 undead Justiciar will only appear when the action Permit Passage is used by the central umbral tremor in the Gauntlet of Shar outside of Balthazar's room. After a couple of rounds, this umbral tremor will allow the Justiciar Crusader to be summoned. Now, most players probably miss this Justiciar because that's probably the first umbral tremor that they destroy. Now, once the Justiciar Crusader appears, you'll need to use Control Undead on him, which means you'll need to be at least level 7 as an Oathbreaker Paladin. Once you've got the undead Justiciar Crusader, he'll eventually cast Subsume Shadow, which turns the Crusader into their umbral form, granting an additional 1d8 necrotic damage, an additional attack each turn, and immunity to non-magical damage. This condition also has no set duration, meaning once it's cast, it is on permanently. Not only does this make this minion incredibly durable, but also incredibly cool looking, the Justiciar Crusader also has Overwhelming Grief, which inflicts Call of the Dark Lady, which deals necrotic damage over time. With its high damage and incredible durability, the Justiciar Crusader is one of the best targets for Control Undead in the entire game. And next up is a hidden interaction with Circle of Bones. Circle of Bones is a rare headgear that can be found on the corpse of Balthazar near the end of Act 2. Circle of Bones provides a 20-foot aura called Undead Ward, granting all allied undead within this radius resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage. However, what it doesn't say is that it also applies to allied fiends. This means that by wearing the Circle of Bones, you'll also provide these resistances to Shovel, the cheeky Quasit, if you found her in the basement of the Blighted Village, and both Imps and Quasits if you are a Pact of the Chain Warlock. The Cambion you can summon from the Infernal Rapier from Will's personal quest also benefits from Circle of Bones, along with Planner Ally Cambion if you have a level 11 Cleric, since both of these are classified as fiends. Now, surprisingly, even though Astarion sometimes benefits from conditions that affect undead, he's actually not affected by Circle of Bones, and neither will your Tav be if you choose to become a vampire. And next up is how to easily pass Yes, the Faith Leap Trial. After patch 7 removed the method to just click and have your character auto-run to the end, we needed to figure out a new method. This method just requires a light source and might even be an intended way to solve the puzzle. Once you have your light source in hand, such as equipping a torch, casting light on yourself, or produce flame, go into the overhead view and zoom into the darkness. You can just barely see a small pinpoint of light, which is marking the center of an invisible tile. By clicking on each pin of light, you can actually navigate your way through the Faith Leap Trial successfully. It's actually just that simple. And next up is a hidden interaction with Magron, an elf who fell victim to the green hag. Now, Magron wished for the mind of a genius, but the hag said that the silly head crossed her. She stands holding her own head within the entrance gallery of the gnarled tea house. If you pick up Magron's head, her body will immediately die. And while many players think that's the end of Magron's story, her head is actually a key to open a secret area. In Act 2 within Moonrise Towers lies Balthazar's laboratory, and upon interacting with the bookshelf, you can discover that an ancient altar can accept an item, and Magron's head can be inserted successfully. Upon inserting her head, a secret area opens up which has decent loot and has a ritual circle that Gale can absorb to create a Shadow Lantern, Wraith Pet, or gain a condition called Mistra's Benevolence, granting advantage on concentration checks, which is very nice. And next up is the Grand Infernal Painting, a depiction of Orin slaying Zevlor gifted to you by Orin herself, one of the rarest items in the entire game. Beneath the portrait lies the dead body of Zevlor with a curl of parchment in his mouth. Orin found and executed Zevlor in a sickening Baalist ritual and drew a painting depicting the act named the Grand Infernal Painting. This painting can be picked up and sold to traders, but it is one of the more beautiful pieces of work, especially because of how rare it is. This grotesque scene is one that most players have probably never seen. To trigger it, you must save the tieflings in Act 1 and make sure to encounter the Mind Flayer pods in the Mind Flayer colony in Act 2. You need to click on the device and make sure not to release nor purge the inhabitants. You actually must select the Leave the Pods Be option to trigger this scene based on my testing, one that probably very few players select. However, if you never interact with the device at all, then this cutscene also will not trigger. Then after you long rest once or twice, or actually 3 times if you're a Dark Urge Origin once you begin Act 3, then you will trigger this scene. You can even use Speak with Dead on Zevlor's corpse, and in that dialogue, one of the last things Zevlor will say is what happened to the others. And next up are the hidden horrors of Moonrise and the secret passage that they guard. If you travel up the outside of Moonrise Towers, you'll eventually run into a group of 3 winged horrors. These are unique in that they'll actually talk to you, and you even get some dialogue options to get them to either scatter, you can attack them, or even convince them to eat each other. And while this dialogue alone is super rare, considering most players probably miss seeing the path to these winged horrors, if you keep progressing past where you encounter them, you'll eventually see a wall that you can destroy. If you destroy that wall, you'll actually be at the top of the main stairs of Moonrise, near where you'd go to battle Ketheric on the roof. But that's not all. You'll also earn inspiration by entering Moonrise Towers through this passage for anyone with an Outlander background, which Karlach has. And next up is Olam, an Aasimar just like Dame Aelin that can be found in the House of Healing Morgue. Now we can learn from a journal beside Olam's corpse that he was attempting to lift the Shadow Curse until he eventually succumbed to it, and we can only find what remains of him. By reading his journal, you'll get inspiration if you have an Acolyte background, which Shadowheart has, but more interestingly, despite Olam being an Aasimar, he has no wings on his corpse. And while it is not possible to confirm it, it is possible that Balthazar found Olam's corpse and removed the wings from it, giving them to Fist Marcus. Now, if you remember Fist Marcus, he attacks Last Light in trying to kidnap Isobel in return for his wings. That's pretty much why he joined the Absolute. Now, there is actually a note you can find called A Little Gift on the 2nd floor of Moonrise Towers, written by Balthazar, explaining to Fist Marcus how rare those appendages are and how he should make good use of them. This nearly confirms that they are Aasimar wings, and since Olam is missing his, it is likely that he is the source of Fist Marcus's wings. And next up is a hidden interaction with Steelclaw. Steelclaw is a cat found on a balcony within Moonrise Towers. Steelclaw is a proud predator of Mind Flayer tadpoles and resents any intrusion into her hunting grounds. If you have Speak with Animals and are playing as the Dark Urge, you can learn from Steelclaw that you had previously met. She said everyone cowered before you, but she dared to snarl at you. And if you choose the dialogue option to try and remember what was forgotten, you will lose control of your yourself and begin to remember how you loved how she would cry out when you stomped on her tail. But when you come to, all you will see is Steelclaw lying in a puddle of blood. And next up is Thisobald's Brewed-Up Bellyglummer. This is a very rare weapon coding which can be only learned through reading Thisobald's research notes located behind a locked door in the back of the Waning Moon in Act 2. After reading it, you can pass a DC 14 investigation intelligence check to have your map marked with the location of a shipment containing the reagents you need to craft it. You'll also need to pick up the purple worm gullet located in the back of the room near the research notes in order to create the suspension for the coating. But it's all worth it because not only is it a cool, very rare weapon coding, it also awards inspiration for the guild artisan and criminal backgrounds. And next up is how to adventure through Act 1 with Minthara as your companion. Now usually it's impossible to travel back to Act 1 after you've recruited Minthara to your party in Act 2. To get around this, all you need to do is cast Silence on Minthara. This silence prevents her from starting dialogue, which forces you to make the choice to either stay in Act 2 or to go back to Act 1 without her. When silenced, she won't be able to interrupt you changing areas to Act 1, but she will be permanently silenced in Act 1. So, to fix this, all you need to do is cast Silence again on her once in Act 1 and then just have her leave the silenced area and she's back to normal. Now the best part about this is that since Silence is a ritual spell, you really don't have to worry about losing spell slots through this trick, and personally I always wanted to explore the Underdark with Minthara since she's a drow, so if you're like me, this trick is awesome. And to recruit Minthara, all you need to do is either side with her and raid the Grove, or you can knock her out with non-lethal damage during the quest to defeat the goblin leaders. Then once you find her in Moonrise Towers in Act 2, you will need to save her life in the dungeon. And next up is some very interesting hidden dialogue. In Act 2 on the Moonrise Towers docks, you can actually use your illithid powers to drive Acolyte Marls, the man responsible for checking the cargo, insane. He'll start shouting about worms in their heads, worms all over, and then you can give him some gentle encouragement and tell him he'd best wash them off, causing him to jump off the docks to his death. Not only is it very satisfying to see another zealot disturbed by witnessing the event during an evil playthrough, but during a Dark Urge specific playthrough, it also awards you inspiration. And next up is how to get Mizora to join you. Mizora has a number of spells that can be extremely helpful. She has all meta magic passives and spells like Dimensional Door, which can be perfect for the final fight. She also has Haste, which is one of the best spells in the game. She's also another body on the field, which can help soak up some damage for you. Now to get her to join you, you'll need to save her in Act 2 within the Mind Flayer colony, and you don't need Will to be in your party, but you will lose the opportunity to get the Infernal Rapier if he isn't in your party by passing the persuasion check that only Will get. Next, in Act 3, you'll need to speak with Mizora at Worm's Rock, and she will then appear at your camp during the next long rest and remain there for the rest of the game. By talking to her in camp and choosing the dialogue option, if you're staying, I need something in return, she will offer her help in the final fight. However, you must keep Will's pact intact with Mizora, otherwise if you break it, she will not join you in the final fight. And next up is Soulful Lobotomy. This is a hidden Dark Urge inspiration point that you can earn by stopping the Absolute Cultists from erasing Minthara's mind and instead do it yourself. You'll still need to pass some dialogue checks in order to make your way into Minthara's mind, but once you do, all you need to do is choose to erase her mind once prompted. If you do, you'll see Minthara talk in a very monotone voice, and more importantly, earn Dark Urge inspiration called Soulful Lobotomy. And from there, Minthara will be reduced to just a single dialogue line. Praise the Absolute. And next up is how to get a point of inspiration by rigging the game of Lanceboard in Act 2. If you save the Tieflings in Act 1, you can find Maul playing Lanceboard against Raphael in Last Light Inn. Raphael is winning, and you will have the option to pass a sleight of hand check to cheat and help Maul win. If you pass the check, at the end of dialogue, you'll be awarded with an inspiration point called Shuffling the Board if you or any of your companions have the Charlatan background, which Astarion has if he's in your party. And next up is how to get Zevlor to join you. Surprisingly, this is probably an ally most players miss, not only because there is no journal entry for Zevlor joining you as an ally, but also because there's an easy to miss key moment in Act 2 where you need to save Zevlor. But he's very much worth saving because he offers you the Hellrider platoon, which includes Zevlor himself, a paladin, and a cleric to aid you in the final fight. So to save Zevlor, you'll need to complete the quest Save the Refugees by siding with the Tieflings. Then, near the very end of Act 2, you'll need to find Zevlor, who is trapped within a Mind Flayer pod within the Mind Flayer colony, and you'll need to release all inhabitants, which includes Mind Flayers, and then ensure that Zevlor does not die during the ensuing battle. Do that successfully, and Zevlor himself will be at your command in the final fight. And next up is a new dialogue that has been added in patch 7 if you return Maul's Eyepatch to her in Act 3. Within the Mind Flayer colony, Balthazar's laboratory contains an Eyepatch. This is in fact Maul's, and when picked up, your character will make a comment on it depending on if you talked to Maul before. Then later in Act 3, when you talk to Maul in the guild hall beneath Baldur's Gate, the titular city, there will be a dialogue option telling her that you found her Eyepatch in Moonrise Towers and asking how she managed to escape. Maul's new dialogue is her boasting that she escaped the Hells when El Turel fell, and that compared to that, Moonrise was child's play. There's no follow-up dialogue related to the Eyepatch, such as asking how her eye came back, so other than that one line, the initial conversation with Maul is mostly the same. And next up is a hidden reward for obtaining a set of 4 weapons. In Act 2, within the House of Healing, there are 4 sisters helping Malice Thorm operate on a patient. Once you defeat all of them, you'll find that each sister is holding a different uncommon weapon, medical tools. If you loot each of these 4 uncommon tools, the syringe, the artificial leech, the trepan, and the bone saw, upon looting the last of the 4 weapons, you'll instantly earn 150 XP and an inspiration point called Right Tool for the Job for anyone in your party with a criminal background. And next up is a hidden reward you can earn from Thisobald. You can encounter Thisobald Thorm within the waning moon just outside of Moonrise Towers. Thisobald will tell you to drink, and if you select the sleight of hand dialogue option at least twice during dialogue, you'll receive an award at the end of the conversation. Now, an easy way to pass sleight of hand checks very easily is by wearing a couple of pieces of equipment you can actually get in Act 1. Now, the graceful cloth grants +2 dexterity and grants advantage on dexterity checks, which includes sleight of hand, and it can be purchased off Lady Esther in the Mountain Pass. You can also get the Smuggler's Ring, which can be found on a skeleton on the lower part of the Risen Road as you head towards where you first find Karlach. At the end of dialogue with Thisobald, you'll be awarded with Tricks of the Trade, an inspiration point if you have a charlatan background, which Astarion has. And next up is how to get a secret reward from Isobel's Sarcophagus, definitely one of the rarest rewards I've ever tried to uncover. Seemingly nowhere online had documented how to get this. Now, if you click on the plaque in front of Isobel's Sarcophagus, you'll hear the narrator say, Susun Elg Olaf. This is Elvish and translates to light slays darkness, roughly, rough translation. However, if you didn't first meet Isobel in Last Light Inn, and then sneak into Ketheric's bedroom and read the note in the chest at the foot of his bed, and then read Melodia's plaque first, then your Tav will not respond in any way to this, but your companions will. Now, this might actually be a bug, since if your Tav doesn't know it's Isobel's Sarcophagus, how could your companions know, right? But if you did all of the previously listed actions, then by finally reading the plaque in front of Isobel's tomb, your Tav will announce that it is Isobel's Sarcophagus before Ketheric brought her back to life, and you'll be rewarded with inspiration for anyone with a noble background, which includes Minthara. And next up is the Dead Druid's Journal. Hidden northeast of Last Light Inn, this journal might not seem like much, but it's important to grab it and not read it until you have Gale or another character with a sage background in your party. The reason for that is because by reading it, you'll actually earn an inspiration point called Corrupted Beyond Recognition, and it's another on-demand point of inspiration, perfect for when you're running low or when you're at max and you want to hold on to it for later. So make sure to grab it and keep it as a way to have more than 4 points of inspiration saved up. The journal itself is rather interesting and describes the Shadow Curse and some background about how it came to be. And next up is the Snowburst Ring. This ring causes your cold damage to create a 15-foot circle of ice around the targets of said cold damage. This is pretty decent if you're playing a full cold damage build, but it is rather disappointing that it doesn't work with Hunger of Hadar, which deals frost damage in an AoE and blinds and slows. If it would work with this, then it would add in the possibility to make your targets fall prone within the AoE, keeping them taking the damage from Hunger of Hadar, but the ring registers the damage being dealt from the spell, not from the wearer. But to find this ring, you'll need to head to the Last Light Inn in Act 2 and enter enter the bedroom just north of the bar. In the corner near the bed, you'll need to pass a perception check to notice some loose planks, and then there, if you loot those planks, you will find this ring. And next up is the family ring. This uncommon ring is very well hidden within the Shadow Cursed lands of Act 2. Within the northeast, you can find an unsent letter, which mentions a ring buried within Ellie Mae's grave. Now, without any direction to go off of from there, most players probably disregard it, but just south from the skeleton which held the letter is a campsite and a tombstone which reads Ellie Mae. If you search the grave, it's empty. And once again, you could just give up your search, but if you walk just a little bit to the right of the grave, you'll roll a DC 10 perception check to notice animal tracks leading off of the cliff. You can follow them, and if you pass yet another DC 10 perception check, you can discover a burrow which contains the family ring. The ring itself grants +2 to death saving throws, which isn't great and apparently wasn't enough for Ellie Mae, but it is certainly a ring that most players probably missed. And next up, did you know that by not using any additional tadpoles, you can actually gain a hidden bonus? At the end of Act 2, you'll encounter the Emperor, and he'll offer you the Astral Touched Tadpole, a tadpole that can evolve you into a partial Illithid, granting you additional powerful Illithid powers at the cost of your character's appearance. If you want this, then great, but if you don't want this, you'll have to pass a difficult DC 21 Wisdom saving throw. However, this DC 21 Wisdom saving throw only appears if you used additional tadpoles to unlock Illithid powers such as Shield of Thralls. But if you never use any tadpoles, you don't need to pass a single wisdom check to resist the astral tadpole. You can just progress through dialogue, easily resisting it. The dialogue for the wisdom saving throw and failing it is pretty epic though, so I highly recommend experiencing it at least once because it really shows the power of Illithid tadpoles. And next up, did you know there's a way to defeat Ketheric through dialogue just like his other relatives? When you encounter Ketheric on the roof of Moonrise Towers, you'll have the option to use intimidation to tell Ketheric to surrender, and you'll consider letting him live. If you pass that roll, you'll have 3 more dialogue options: a persuasion, intimidation, and deception check. If you also pass any one of these rolls, then during the second encounter with Ketheric within the Mind Flayer colony, you'll have a final persuasion check offered to you. If you pass this, you can actually skip fighting Ketheric and he will just jump into the pit on his own, dying. This lets you go straight into the Apostle of Merkel fight, but be warned and be careful because the Apostle of Merkel will still have invulnerability from Dame Aelin if you freed her, if you didn't start the fight by freeing her. So I recommend going invisible and free her as your method of starting the fight, and then pass the dialogue check and skip right into fighting the Apostle of Merkel, skipping the second Ketheric fight entirely. And next up is how to get Voss's Silver Sword. Now, this is not to be confused with the Silver Sword of the Astral Plane, which is a legendary. Voss's Silver Sword is a very rare sword that most players probably have never seen because the only way to get it is by looting it off Voss's body when you encounter him at any of 4 different scenarios. During the start of Act 2, when he visits your camp, if you went into the Astral Prism in the Githyanki Creche, you can fight him there and kill him for it. Act 3, when you encounter him in Sharess's Caress, if you agree to help him and then betray him there. And then if you continue to help him, instead of killing him, you can also encounter him in the lower city sewers or near the end of Act 3 within the upper city. Kill him in any of those places and you can get his sword. Now, this sword grants Wrathful Smite, which is usable once per long rest, and it also has a weapon feature called Interplanar Slayer, which grants a +1d4 bonus to damage and attack rolls against Githyanki, aberrations, fiends, and elementals. However, due to a bug, Interplanar Slayer does not grant +1d4 to attack rolls, just +1d4 to the damage roll. Even still, it's a very rare sword that most players probably haven't seen, since working with Voss is probably the option most players choose. And next up is how to gain infinite spell slots. Now, we all know about the infinite spell slot trick by playing as a sorcerer and unequipping and re-equipping the Shield of Devotion, which grants 1 level 1 spell slot each time it's equipped. By then converting those new spell slots into sorcery points, you can then turn those sorcery points back into spell slots beyond any number you could possibly have had before. However, once you use all those spell slots, let's say you created 25 level 1 spell slots using the Shield of Devotion trick, you can then drink 1 single potion of angelic relief and gain all 25 spell slots back. This means doing a little bit of work up front dramatically increases the value of these potions of angelic relief for you, making your sorcerer incredibly powerful, able to gain X number of spell slots back per potion of angelic relief, depending on how patient you are. You can buy the Shield of Devotion off Tally in Last Light Inn, and you can buy potions of angelic relief from Lantar carve in Moonrise Towers.